Gentlemen, I'm the only authority you will need. You shoot.
I can't remember anything.
Frank Castle, once a dedicated Marine, led a tranquil life with his family until a tragic event took their lives. Plagued by the relentless memories of their murder, he set out across the nation to target the gang members responsible for his family's demise, earning him the nickname the Punisher. After avenging their deaths, he staged his own demise to vanish from public view. 6 months have passed, and Frank, now under the alias Pete Castiglione, resides discreetly in New York City, working at a Brooklyn construction site. His daily routine involves smashing walls with a sledgehammer, channeling his simmering anger. However, his intense work ethic isn't admired by all, particularly Lang, a colleague who resents losing over time because of Frank. Lang sabotages Frank's lunch, hurls threats, and tries to provoke him, yet Frank remarkably keeps his cool. Among the workers is Donnie, who reaches out to Frank by sharing his lunch and revealing the loss of his own parents. Donnie, learning of Frank's military background, seeks companionship, but Frank is clear he's not the friend Donnie is looking for. During a break, Frank overhears Lang and another worker, Holly, planning a robbery at a poker game run by the Nucci crime family. Despite being warned to keep distant after they realize he's eavesdropped, Frank disregards their intimidation. When a work accident draws their attention away, Frank coldly ignores the injured colleague. This distraction allows Polly and Lang to rope Donnie into their criminal plans. Eager for some extra cash, Donnie joins the duo and they head to the location of the poker game. After incapacitating the guard, they storm the basement, guns drawn, and take everyone hostage. Donnie starts collecting the cash. Disaster strikes when his wallet slips to the floor, revealing his identity. Now exposed, Donnie becomes a target for the Nucci's men, who can easily track him down. It's game over for the robbers. Frustrated at Donnie for jeopardizing their plans, Lang and Polly unleash their anger, beating him mercilessly. Realizing that the Nucci gangsters will sooner or later find them, they decide to end Donnie's life, so he cannot give up their names. Donnie attempts to fight back, but the trio overpowers him, tossing him into the concrete mix. As Lang prepares to finish the job, Frank appears behind them. He demands Lang shut off the mixer, but when Lang refuses, a brawl ensues. Armed with his sledgehammer, Frank takes on the men one by one. Each forceful blow to the head leaves them incapacitated, and Frank dumps them into the concrete mix. As Lang pleads for mercy and offers cash, Frank isn't persuaded. Instead, he subjects Lang to torture to extract the location of the poker game. Once he gets the information, he coldly dispatches Lang. In the chaos, Donnie manages to escape using a rope dropped by Frank. Meanwhile, the Nucci mobsters are gearing up to track down Donnie when the lights unexpectedly go out. Gunfire erupts, and when the gang leader returns to the room, he's stunned to find everyone on the floor lifeless. Frank emerges from the shadows and swiftly takes down the leader with a gunshot. On the other hand, there's a special agent, Dinah Madani. She's back in New York City after a stint in Afghanistan. Her primary focus is the murder of her partner, Zubair, an Afghan national police officer. Dinah suspects that U.S. soldiers were involved in heroin trafficking, and when Zubair uncovered it, they silenced him. She tries convincing the special agent in charge, Carson Wolf, but he dismisses the case as off limits. Undeterred, Dinah turns to her new partner, Sam Stein, for assistance. She urges him to dig into files about Colonel Schoonover, the explosion and drug bust at the docks last year, and everything related to one of Schoonover's men, Frank Castle. Although Sam believes the Punisher is dead, Dinah finds it hard to believe that Frank and Schoonover died within New York City limits, just 20 miles from each other. It can't be a mere coincidence. Meanwhile, as Frank exits the basement, an unidentified person is seen analyzing gait recognition on CCTV footage of Frank. The man identifies himself as Micro and drops Frank's real name, revealing he knows Frank is alive. During their conversation, Frank discovers that Microchip is the one who anonymously left a disk at his house, containing footage of Zubair being killed by the U.S. Army. Frank proposes a face-to-face meeting, but Microchip insists that Frank must first recognize they're not enemies. Observing a light from a nearby building, Frank swiftly heads to the rooftop. Upon investigation, he finds a mirror and a flashlight creating the beam of light. A phone left by Microchip is also present for communication. As Frank surveys the area, he spots Microchip waving from the rooftop of the adjacent building. Worried, Frank pays a visit to his friend, Curtis Hoyle, a former Navy corpsman and insurance salesman, the only person aware of his survival. Frank confides in him about Micro and discloses that Micro claims to possess crucial answers. Micro's sudden re-entry into his life prompts Frank to reflect on whether his family met their demise due to his own mistakes. Now, Frank believes that Micro might hold the key to unraveling these questions. In his quest for information on Micro, Frank turns to his trusted friend and lawyer, Karen Page. He briefs her on Micro's existence and seeks her assistance in locating the mysterious figure. Micro subtly reveals that he, too, might be one of the city's unseen shadows, hinting at his own fabricated demise. With this information, Frank tracks down Micro's home and hatches a scheme. He deliberately positions himself in the path of Micro's wife Sarah's vehicle and feigns injury, even going so far as to cut his forehead with a razor to authenticate his distress. A concerned Sarah brings him inside to care for his wound. As they talk, Sarah shares the story of her husband's supposed passing. Unknown to her, Micro has equipped the house with surveillance cameras to monitor his family's safety. Seeing Frank at his home, Micro becomes alarmed, fearing for his wife's safety, and hurries back, opting to wait outside. Upon noticing a damaged headlight on Sarah's car, Frank offers his help to fix it rather than causing any harm, thereby assisting Micro's family and allowing Micro to slip away unnoticed back to his refuge. That night, in an effort to remain undetected by gait recognition technology, Frank shaves off his beard and alters his walk. He then stealthily enters Carson Wolf's home, confronts him, and after a physical altercation, secures him to a chair. Under interrogation, Wolf confesses that Micro was considered a traitor, which supposedly led to his execution. Unsatisfied with this answer, Frank shoots Wolf in the thigh. Frank inquires about his potential involvement with Schoonover, and Wolf denies any connection. Despite being injured, Wolf manages to free himself. He seizes Frank's gun and unmasks him. It's at this moment that Wolf realizes Frank is alive. Facing Frank, Wolf reveals the sinister motive behind the killing of Frank's family. They aim to eliminate Frank and used additional bodies to mask the true target. When questioned about why they wanted him dead, Wolf claims it was because they thought Frank leaked the tape to Micro. In a tense moment, Wolf attempts to shoot Frank, only to discover that Frank has already emptied the magazine. Seizing the opportunity, Frank regains control, delivering a powerful punch to Wolf before ultimately ending his life by snapping his neck. The next day, Frank sits in a diner and receives a call from Micro. Micro's first question revolves around why Frank visited his house. Frank responds that Micro chose to put his family in jeopardy by crossing paths with the wrong person. With this stern warning, Frank directs Micro to meet him at a cemetery. Upon Micro's arrival at the designated location, he encounters Curtis instead of Frank. Curtis relays the message that Frank has canceled the meeting and issues a stern warning. If Micro continues pursuing Frank, Curtis will retaliate by going after Sarah. Disheartened, Micro returns to his hideout, only to be surprised by Frank, who had hidden himself in Micro's car trunk. With disbelief, Micro witnesses Frank knocking him unconscious. Upon waking up, Micro begins recounting the harrowing story of the day he encountered Carson Wolf and his man. Sensing trouble, Micro instructed his family to stay in the car no matter what. As Wolf and his men closed in, Micro left the car, hoping to avoid confrontation. However, Wolf caught up with him near the river. In a desperate attempt to clear his name, Micro shouted that the authorities had the wrong information. He emphasized he was just an analyst, not a criminal. Ignoring Micro's pleas, Wolf continued to threaten him. Micro's wife, Sarah, arrived at the scene only to witness a gun pointed at her husband. As Micro refused to surrender, Wolf shot him in the chest, causing him to plunge into the river. Miraculously, the bullet struck the cell phone in Micro's shirt pocket, saving his life. Micro proceeds to detail the sequence of events leading to his becoming a target for Homeland Security. Revealing a flashback, it is disclosed that Micro received a CD containing footage of Ahmad Zubair's murder. As an analyst, he felt compelled to assess the content. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Micro decided to take action and sent the incriminating material to Dinah Madani. This choice made him a target for Homeland Security, particularly for Carson Wolf, who was well aware of Ahmad Zubair's murder. In the current moment, Frank subjects Micro to interrogation, who is now stripped and bound to a chair. Unexpectedly, a 3-minute countdown initiates. Micro discloses that it's a fail-safe system. If the countdown reaches 0, all camera feeds will be broadcast to media outlets. To stop it, a code and a retinal scanner are required. As Frank is standing close to him, Micro takes the opportunity to inject Frank with a sedative, causing him to lose consciousness. Upon waking and realizing that Micro hasn't executed him, Frank questions Micro's motives. In response, Micro attempts to persuade him that they should join forces in exposing the people behind Ahmad Zubair's death and the death of Frank's family. Frank starts recollecting the traumatic events in Afghanistan, where they did a mission called Cerberus. Frank's squad captured Ahmad Zubair, and a CIA agent known as Orange subjected him to brutal torture to extract information about his knowledge of their heroin operation. The conversations were conducted in Persian, making it evident that none of the squad members were aware of Zubair's innocence or Orange's involvement in drug trafficking. Tragically, Orange commanded Frank to shoot Zubair in the head and bury him, and ordered that Frank obediently carry out. Several days later, Frank and his squad are briefed on a mission by Schoonover and Orange. From the outset, Frank harbors doubts about the mission's authenticity, suspecting it to be a setup, but his concerns are dismissed. The operation soon descends into chaos as Schoonover is severely injured, losing his arm, and the team is ambushed, coming under intense gunfire. Overcome with fury, Frank steps up to lead, managing to clear a path for the team's escape. In the tense moments following their escape, as they receive medical care and attend, Orange is singularly fixated on confirming the death of their target. Unbeknownst to Frank and his team, the mission was indeed a trap, orchestrated by Orange to erase any witnesses to Zubair's murder. Incensed by Orange's indifference to the team's plight and obsession with the target, Frank attacks him in a fit of rage, resulting in Orange losing an eye. Back in the present, Micro informs Frank that the operation they participated in was clandestine, with no official records or authorization from the US Congress, making it illegal. Frank agrees to join forces with Micro, but sets a stringent condition: their targets must be completely neutralized, leaving no room for trials. Micro agrees to Frank's terms. To execute their plan, Frank and Micro require weapons. Micro hacks into the NYPD system and discovers an illegal arms shipment arriving from Greece, with Turk as the buyer. To reach the location, they decide to ambush another gang. After a confrontation that involves killing the gang members and rescuing one of their victims, Frank and Micro depart the warehouse in 2 cars. Frank seizes Turk at gunpoint and demands information on the weapon's location. However, Turk shatters his plan, revealing that the Greeks are selling the truck to another buyer who's willing to purchase the entire stock. All Turk can offer is a pink gun intended for a gangster's daughter. Disheartened, Frank returns to the hideout and starts cleaning Micro's pistol and the pink gun. Meanwhile, Sam briefs the team on their mission. They will be posing as criminal buyers to secure the weapons from the Greeks. Utilizing his hacking skills, Micro identifies the new location of the arms. As night falls, the mission starts with Dinah Medini leading. One car tails the truck while other officers, including Sam, wait at the intended destination. Suddenly, their communication systems are compromised and a song starts playing in the background. Unable to communicate through comms, Dinah calls Sam, instructing him to remain focused. She soon realizes that someone is feeding them a loop, as she notices the truck passing from the same location a 3rd time. While Frank seizes control of the truck, he directs Micro to take it to the hideout, while he follows in another car. Meanwhile, Dinah refuses to abandon the mission. She heads to the location and catches up to Frank's car. As she continues following the truck, Frank obstructs her path, preventing her from pursuing it. A chase ensues between Frank and Dinah, ending in Dinah cleverly eluding Frank's sight and reappearing directly in front of his car. Both Frank and Dinah accelerate, prepared for a confrontation. Fortunately, tragedy unfolds as Micro collides with Dinah's car, causing a crash. Frank becomes infuriated with Micro for hitting Dinah's vehicle, sparking a brief argument between them. Fueled by the urgency to save Dinah's life, Frank pulls her out of the wreckage and places her on the road, away from the burning car. As he reads her identity, Dinah questions Frank if he killed Wolf. Frank confirms it, saying that he was a dirty agent. He then departs from the scene, warning Dinah not to interfere with his plans. Frank now possesses the guns, but he remains in the dark about Agent Orange's true identity. To uncover this information, he decides to approach Gunnar Henderson, the man who recorded Zubair's murder. Like Frank and Micro, Gunnar lives in solitude to avoid drawing attention from Agent Orange. Frank locates Gunnar in a forest, and as he explores the area, he is unexpectedly attacked by Gunnar with an arrow. After extracting the arrow, Frank takes cover behind a tree and repeatedly asserts that he is a friend, not an enemy. As Gunnar approaches, Frank surrenders, revealing how he lost his family due to the video Gunnar made. Recognizing his former colleague, Gunnar agrees to engage in a conversation with Frank. When questioned about Agent Orange's identity, Gunnar discloses that he has no information about the agent's real name. During their conversation, the duo hears the approach of a helicopter, and soon, soldiers arrive in the forest. Agent Orange is overseeing the mission, utilizing helmet cameras worn by each soldier. It becomes apparent that ever since becoming the deputy director of the CIA, he has been striving to erase his questionable past. To achieve this, he aims to eliminate everyone who witnessed Zubair's murder at his hands. Since the mission wasn't officially sanctioned, there are no records of those present. However, he managed to eavesdrop on Dinah's conversation with Sam, where Gunnar was mentioned. Desperate to eliminate any potential witnesses, he sent his team to kill Gunnar. As the soldiers close in, Gunnar skillfully uses his compound bow and traps to harm a few of them. Frank then finishes the job. Meanwhile, Agent Orange, watching through the helmet cameras, is astonished to see that Frank is still alive. Amid the confrontation, Gunnar is shot twice, and when Frank attempts to retaliate, he too is shot. Stranded without ammunition, Frank and his companion take refuge behind a boulder as enemy soldiers close in. From above, Micro, monitoring via drone, warns Frank of the looming danger. With Micro's guidance, they neutralize the advancing pair. Armed with their adversaries' weapons, Frank confronts more soldiers, culminating in a brutal stab to the shoulder of the last attacker. While dealing with this foe, Frank directly threatens Agent Orange via the camera, vowing vengeance before snapping the soldier's neck. Despite their efforts, the skirmish leaves both Frank and his ally, Gunnar, grievously wounded. As darkness envelops the forest, Frank, supporting the faltering Gunnar, presses on until Gunnar's injuries overcome him, causing him to collapse. Micro soon finds them, provides first aid, and evacuates them from the forest in a van. While unconscious, Frank envisions a serene family dinner with his and Micro's families, which horrifyingly shifts to him being restrained and witnessing soldiers executing everyone at the table, leaving him in utter despair. Awakening to Micro tending his wounds, Frank learns Micro has been tracking radio transmissions all day. Disturbingly, someone has been repeatedly mentioning Frank's codename Raven, a moniker previously used by his friend Billy. Despite Micro's concerns about Billy's potential awareness of Frank's survival, Frank remains unworried, trusting in their deep bond and mutual protection. Meanwhile, Dinah Madani pays a visit to the location where Gunnar met his demise. Micro had notified the local authorities before leaving, ensuring that Gunnar's body would be discovered. Although the bodies of the soldiers were removed by their sender, Dinah pieces together the events and suspects that Frank was present with Gunnar and likely made the call to the police. Her suspicions are confirmed when Sam informs her that the blood sample found in the area matches Frank's. Now, Dinah is certain that a death squad was dispatched by those who want to keep Mission Cerberus under wraps. It dawns on her that the situation is more dangerous than she initially thought, involving influential figures with the power to deploy a death squad. In her quest to uncover more about Frank, Dinah reaches out to Billy Russo, Frank's friend who owns a private military company. She shares with him the news that Frank is alive, but in critical condition. Since Billy is aware of the Afghanistan case Dinah is pursuing, she seeks Billy's assistance in locating Frank, the key witness to the events there. Familiar with the situation, Billy expresses willingness to help find Frank if Dinah's claims are true. Following this, Billy pays a visit to Curtis, a mutual friend of his and Frank's, seeking information on Frank's whereabouts. Curtis pretends to know nothing. Billy then reveals his intention to aid Frank, not the government, by facilitating his escape from the country and providing him with a new identity for a peaceful life. After Billy departs, Curtis visits Frank and discloses the details of his encounter with Billy, now believing that Frank should accept the offer. Curtis sees it as an opportunity for Frank to escape Agent Orange's looming threat and embrace a normal life once more. The next day, Frank and Billy reunite at the riverside, engaging in a conversation after a prolonged separation. Billy shares details about his company and recounts his meeting with Dinah. Curious about what Frank knows she doesn't. In response, Frank divulges the entire narrative involving Agent Orange, Shinover and Bennett, trafficking heroin from Afghanistan within the bodies of fallen soldiers. As a true friend, Billy advises Frank to let Dinah pursue his investigation, emphasizing that she shares a common goal of bringing the culprits to justice. Before parting ways, Billy extends an offer to help Frank leave the city via boat, saying he will wait for him that night. Micro bides his time in his hideout, patiently waiting. Meanwhile, Frank extends his apologies to Sarah for missing the dinner invite. Their conversation takes a heartfelt turn, as Sarah confides in Frank about the challenges she faces living without David, particularly the impact on her son Zach. Frank offers words of comfort and motivation, witnessing the scene from his hideout. Micro feels distressed for not being there for his family during this difficult period. As night falls, Billy anticipates Frank's arrival at the port, but Frank fails to show up. Disheartened, Billy returns to his car and informs his associate that Frank won't come. Surprisingly, the so-called friend turns out to be Agent Orange. It's revealed that Billy is in league with Agent Orange and wants to see Frank eliminated as soon as possible. The next day, Colonel Bennett, known for smuggling heroin in corpses, finds his dinner interrupted when Frank pays an unexpected visit. Frank, seeking information on Agent Orange's identity, confronts Bennett and presses him for answers. However, Frank's interrogation serves as a ruse to distract Bennett, while Micro clones his phone. Meanwhile, Billy, who knew Frank would come after Bennett, positions himself outside the house with his team. As Frank approaches, he skillfully infiltrates the building. Micro monitors the situation through a drone and alerts Frank to the incoming threat. In a strategic move, Frank fills the area with gas to disorient the mercenaries, making it challenging for them to aim accurately. As the men enter the room, he systematically takes them down. Billy, his identity concealed, remains a mystery to Frank. In a twist of fate, Billy mistakenly targets one of his own, granting Frank a crucial chance to flee. Meanwhile, Micro completes a phone cloning operation, enabling them to monitor Bennett's whereabouts and interactions, aware that Agent Orange would dispatch his men to Bennett's residence. The duo skillfully turns the tables on Agent Orange. The following day, a visibly irate Billy accompanies Bennett to Agent Orange's secure location, berating his allies for using him as a pawn to draw Frank out. During a tense exchange, Bennett assures Agent Orange that he has kept their secrets from Frank. Realizing Bennett could still pose a risk, Agent Orange decides it's time for Bennett to vanish. A relocation plan is crafted to move Bennett overseas to a place where Frank can't find him, with instructions to abandon his phone at the safe house. As Billy escorts him to his new beginning, Micro keeps tabs on the phone, gleaning vital details about the safe house. Simultaneously, Dinah, pondering over the case in her office, experiences an epiphany and confides in Sam that she suspects their office is bugged. After discussing Gunner's situation in her office and his subsequent demise, she grows wary. A thorough search confirms her suspicion, revealing a hidden bug on a shelf. Despite uncovering the listening device, Dinah decides to leave it undisturbed, perhaps planning to use it to her advantage. Simultaneously, Billy transports Bennett to a remote upstate motel. In a moment of confession, Bennett admits to Billy that he never liked him or any of his Special Forces comrades. As they converse, Bennett uncovers a grim surprise under the bed covers: the lifeless body of the woman he was with the previous night. Realizing he's being framed, Bennett reaches for his gun, but Billy seizes his arm, delivering multiple fatal stabs until Bennett dies. On another front, Frank arrives outside the safe house, taking aim at Agent Orange. His shot, however, is thwarted by bulletproof glass, allowing Agent Orange to survive. Though the attack is a failure, Frank learns the true identity of his target, William Rollins, the director of the CIA's covert operations. The next day, Micro's house experiences a sudden camera outage, prompting Frank to check in and ensure everything is fine. It appears that Sarah intentionally turned off the internet at her house as a lesson for Zach. Once Frank confirms the situation is under control, he prepares to leave. However, as they exchange a farewell embrace, things take an unexpected turn. When Sarah attempts to kiss Frank, caught off guard, Frank stops her advances, creating an awkward moment between them. Micro witnesses the unexpected kiss through the cameras, causing awkward tension between him and Frank. Despite the discomfort, he realizes it wasn't Frank's fault and harbors no grudge against him. Desperate to reunite with his wife, he suggests contacting Dinah Madani, who shares their goal of apprehending the same culprit. With the video evidence and an eyewitness, Dinah can arrest Agent Orange, which will allow Micro to return to his family. However, Frank firmly reminds Micro of their agreement. Agent Orange dies in the end. Micro loses control, saying that Frank's family is dead because of him, and now he wants everybody to die. Desperate, Micro attempts to contact Dinah, but is stopped by Frank, who intervenes and renders him unconscious. Meanwhile, Dinah and Sam hatch a plan to expose the individuals behind the office bug. They devise a fake tactical plan for a fake weapon heist involving Frank. Obviously, Frank won't be there, but their plan will lure out those responsible for the bug. As anticipated, Billy falls for the trap and meets Agent Orange to discuss their next moves. The decision is made to eliminate Frank on the spot. To execute the job, Billy recruits former contractors from his company, enticing them with the promise of a substantial sum in exchange for successfully carrying out the murder. As predicted by Dinah, Billy and his team fall right into the trap. A fierce shootout erupts between Homeland Security and Billy's crew, with Dinah and Sam also present to apprehend those responsible for the office bug. The confrontation leaves most members of both groups dead. Recognizing the escalating chaos, Billy attempts to flee. He abandons a team member and later shoots him dead to prevent any exposure to Dinah. During his escape, Sam intercepts him, holding him at gunpoint. Feeling cornered, Billy surrenders, allowing Sam to disarm him and reveal his face. However, in a shocking twist, Billy seizes the moment and stabs Sam multiple times with a concealed spring-loaded retractable blade from his right sleeve. Before Dinah arrives, Billy manages to escape, leaving Sam on the floor with his throat slit. Upon discovering Sam in critical condition, Dinah panics and attempts to stop the bleeding, but Sam has already lost a significant amount of blood. Despite her efforts, Sam succumbs to his wounds. On the other hand, we are shown the story of Lewis Wilson, a United States Army veteran grappling with the challenges of reintegrating into civilian life. Upon his return to the United States, he confronted the devastating effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. Battling a precarious mental state, he even resorted to aggression towards his father. In a critical moment, his attempt at ending his own life failed, leaving him grappling with profound trauma. Opting for the cold comfort of a self-dug foxhole in his yard over his own bed, he sought solace in familiar military routines. Hoping to harness his military skills, he applied to join Billy's private military company, Anvil. Unfortunately, his hopes were dashed when Billy, informed of his mental health struggles and respecting a request from his father, chose not to enlist him. Reluctantly, Lewis began attending group therapy sessions for military veterans organized by Curtis. It was there that he met O'Connor, who posed as a Vietnam War veteran but was actually disseminating extremist ideologies. Feeling alienated by his own nation and rejected, Lewis found a disturbing sense of alignment with O'Connor's radical views, believing that societal norms no longer held sway and that the country had abandoned its soldiers. Inspired to make a stand, Lewis joined O'Connor in a protest outside the Bronx County Courthouse. The protest centered around a teacher facing charges for entering his classroom with a revolver. Before long, a police officer named Faye approached Lewis and O'Connor, questioning their presence and inquiring if they were engaging in a protest. Lewis responded that they were merely distributing pamphlets, asserting it was within their legal rights. O'Connor gave his explanation for being there. Faye interpreted it as evidence of a protest and insisted they leave. However, Lewis stood his ground, maintaining that they weren't obstructing anyone from entering the courthouse. Faye was still unwilling to accept Lewis' reasoning and insisted they go, so O'Connor suggested they grab some coffee. But this infuriated Faye, who claimed that Lewis had reached for his gun, a claim that Lewis refuted. Lewis then attempted to summon O'Connor as a witness, but O'Connor had left. He watched as O'Connor left him and Faye then shoved him to the ground and arrested him. Later, Lewis delved into O'Connor's military records, discovering that O'Connor never served in the Vietnam War. He confronted O'Connor with the evidence, but the liar denied the accusations, suggesting someone might have tampered with the information. Despite O'Connor's attempts to deny the truth, Lewis saw through the lies. When Lewis refused to accept his story, O'Connor demanded he leave his house, sparking a violent altercation between the two. In a desperate bid for survival, O'Connor wielded a knife, slashing Lewis across the stomach. However, Lewis managed to overpower him and retaliates by stabbing O'Connor multiple times, leading to his demise. Struggling to cope with the aftermath, Lewis tried to take his own life but couldn't. Faced with the overwhelming events that had unfolded, he resolved to take matters into his own hands. He went to a hardware store and purchased materials to craft homemade bombs. With all preparations in place, Lewis sets off numerous explosives across New York City, targeting a field office, a police station, and the federal courthouse. Amidst the chaos, he sends a letter to Frank's lawyer, Karen. He seeks Karen's help in the letter, believing she can understand his perspective. According to his manifesto, he's defending the liberties of the American people against government he sees as trying to strip away those rights. As a call to arms, he insists that Karen publish his remarks, otherwise, he will target the New York Bulletin building next time. Disagreeing with his views, Karen opts to address him in an editorial, expressing her disgust at his beliefs. Meanwhile, Frank discovers the bombings through the news and reads Karen's response to Lewis. Concerned for Karen's safety, he fears her life may be in danger. On the other side, Karen participates in a radio program with Senator Stan Ori to condemn Lewis' actions. Expressing his disappointment, he asks Karen why she spoke negatively about him. In response, Karen explains that she detests everything he has done. While listening to Karen condemn his actions, Lewis declares that she and Ori are on the wrong side of the war. He ends the call. Realizing that Karen's life is in jeopardy, Frank instructs Micro to track down Lewis. Micro is puzzled about why Frank is focusing on this case instead of their own. Frank then reveals that Karen is like his family, and he can't bear to lose her. Aware that Lewis poses a threat to Karen, Frank loses control and demands that Micro locate Lewis as soon as possible. In the meantime, Curtis heads to O'Connor's house as he hasn't heard from him in days. Upon his arrival, he finds the door locked and detects an ominous odor emanating from within. After gaining entry, he encounters the grim sight of O'Connor's lifeless body on a sofa, left exactly as Lewis had abandoned him. As he delves deeper into the house, discovering explosives, Lewis emerges abruptly and assaults him. A violent confrontation follows, with Lewis inflicting severe torture on Curtis. Soon after, Frank arrives to find Curtis restrained in a chair, a bomb strapped to his chest. Engaging Lewis over the phone, Frank cunningly plays a psychological game with him. Outside, Lewis, expressing admiration for Frank's vigilantism, proposes they become comrades, revealing he has alerted the police but hopes Frank survives. He offers Frank the crucial information needed to disarm the bomb. As law enforcement arrives, Frank acts decisively, incapacitating an officer with a thrown stone and quickly overpowering another, seizing the chance to flee in their vehicle. Yet, upon returning to his hideout, Frank faces a dire revelation. Dashcam footage from the police car has exposed his identity across the United States. Now branded a terrorist, he is wrongfully accused of orchestrating all the recent bombings. The following day, while Karen interviews Ori, an explosion at the door sends them both flying to the floor. Smoke fills the room as Lewis and Frank start taking down the guards. Despite being injured, Ori manages to get up, seize his pistol and fire at Lewis while making his escape. Karen is left alone with Lewis. This is the account Senator Ori provides to Detective Sergeant Brett Mahoney. However, Karen refutes his claims, stating it's not what actually transpired. She then recounts the actual events that unfolded. Lewis entered the room wielding a pistol, ruthlessly taking down everyone in his path. Senator Ori attempted to flee, but Lewis apprehended him at gunpoint. Karen tried to retrieve her pistol from her bag, but the explosion had dislodged it. As Lewis prepared to kill Ori, Karen pleaded for mercy. Just as Lewis was about to execute them both, Frank suddenly appeared, leaping in front of Karen to take the shot. Seizing the opportunity, Karen grabbed her pistol and attempted to make her escape. However, Senator Ori pushed her before Lewis to ensure his getaway. Frank aimed his gun at Lewis, but Lewis revealed he was holding a bomb with a single butt in his hand capable of detonating it. Upon reaching the corridor, Frank and the security guards are compelled to surrender, while Lewis takes the elevator. A skirmish ensues between Frank and the security personnel. Frank strategically employs a lifeless body as a shield to maneuver away from them. The other half of the story is narrated by Dinah. A day earlier, she discovered that the individuals who attempted to kill Frank on the day of Sam's death were all linked to Billy's company at some point. Suspecting Billy of possibly installing the bug in her office, she confronted him to inquire about his intentions. Billy acknowledged the identity of the deceased man but asserted that they were all former employees of his company, implying the company no longer had any association with them. As Billy denied the accusations, the alarm rang due to the ongoing attack. Everyone suspected Frank as the culprit, but Dinah was convinced of his innocence. She took the stairs and eventually found Frank. She suggested they team up to expose Agent Orange, but Frank insisted on dealing with him himself. Amid their conversation, Frank gets shot by his best friend, Billy. Billy finally revealed his true allegiance, disclosing himself as an accomplice of Agent Orange. Justifying his actions as part of a war, he threatened Dinah to step aside and allow him to kill Frank. During their confrontation, security personnel arrived and apprehended everyone, including Billy, Dinah, and Frank. However, just before Frank could be taken into custody, he used a fire hose to make his way down and escape from the authorities. Meanwhile, Louis had taken Karen to the kitchen, where he threatened to detonate the bomb. Frank soon joined them, prompting Louis to use Karen as a hostage. Frank adeptly diverts Louis's attention, covertly signaling Karen to sever the white wire, successfully deactivating the bomb. In a swift action, Karen snips the correct wire and manages to shoot Louis through her purse, hitting his foot. Realizing defeat is imminent, Louis barricades himself in the storage room, hastily rewiring the bomb to detonate. Karen and Frank make a narrow escape, fleeing just moments before the door blasts open. Meanwhile, at Sarah's residence, a police officer arrives following a tip-off from Zach, who, having seen Frank's identity disclosed on the news, reports his regular visits. Sarah, attempting to downplay the situation, suggests a potential misunderstanding. As the officer conducts his investigation, he inquires about Leo, Sarah's daughter, whom Sarah claims is staying overnight with friends, although she is actually in the house, witnessing everything. Sensing danger when the officer insists they head to the police station, Sarah urges Zach to flee. The officer then discloses his true motives. Giving chase, Sarah manages to subdue him and seizes a knife, but as another officer captures Zach, she is forced to surrender, oblivious to the turmoil at her own home. Elsewhere, Micro watches as Billy publicly labels Frank a terrorist. Reviewing security footage from Micro's house after noticing signs of a struggle, they uncover the abduction of Sarah and Zach. This revelation hits Frank hard as he realizes their hideout might now be exposed, given Sarah has his contact details, potentially allowing Billy to trace them. Anticipating the imminent showdown, Frank meticulously prepares. He strategically places guns in various locations, loads his weapons, dons a bulletproof jacket, and awaits the arrival of the enemies. As expected, the hideout is soon infiltrated by mercenaries. The men are unaware that they are facing not just Frank but the Punisher, who has returned with even more resolve. Executing a calculated ambush, Frank decapitates one mercenary and hurls it at the others. The resulting explosion injures two attackers, allowing Frank to take down the remaining assailants. Utilizing his exceptional combat skills, he skillfully evades their attacks, striking them with lethal precision and turning them into lifeless bodies. After neutralizing all the mercenaries, Frank uses their phones to contact Billy. Billy informs him that Sarah and Zach are in their custody and proposes a deal. If Frank and Micro want to free them, they must surrender. The exchange is set to take place the next day. Later, Frank joins Dinah, Micro, and Leo, who is now reunited with her father after successfully evading capture by the cops. Having learned that Micro allowed Dinah in, Frank decides to place his trust in her. The next day, the exchange takes place. Zach and Sarah are compelled to wear fuel containers that have been cut and are leaking. Sarah walks hesitantly towards Frank and Micro, struggling to believe her husband is alive. Simultaneously, Frank maintains contact with Billy, who has his sniper aimed at him. Leaving no room for double-crossing, Billy's men ignite the fuel, prompting Micro to remove his jacket and use it to extinguish the flames. Homeland Security arrives at the location, but before they can intervene, Frank is caught and knocked unconscious. Tragically, Micro becomes a victim of a bullet from Homeland Security. As he succumbs to death, Sarah screams in pain, covering her son's eyes to spare him from witnessing his father's brutal end. The traumatic loss of her husband is relived once again. Micro's body is transported to the Homeland Security building, where it is revealed that he is still alive. It turns out his survival was part of their orchestrated plan. Frank was supposed to assist Dinah in apprehending the culprits, but he went unconscious, disrupting their strategy. It appears he might have done it intentionally to prevent the criminals from being arrested. He wanted to ensure they face his own form of justice, which is death. Despite the setback, Micro is eventually reunited with his family, sharing a heartfelt embrace. On the other side, Billy has brought Frank to his hideout, where Agent Orange has joined them. Restrained to a chair, Frank asserts that he will eliminate all of them. Agent Orange dons special gloves and starts brutally punching Frank in the face, causing him to bleed. A computer specialist is summoned to erase everything from Micro's computer. Despite the torture, Frank laughs at Agent Orange. Meanwhile, Micro discloses Frank's true plan to Dinah. He reveals that Frank is driven by the desire to eliminate these individuals, and they had an agreement. Micro promised to give Frank the chance to kill them. Anticipating that Billy would take Frank to their hideout, they knew they needed Frank to access the computers with his retinal scan, since Micro was no longer there. On Dinah's computer, Micro accesses the CCTV at their hideout, where they witness Frank receiving a severe beating from Agent Orange. Micro explains that this was all part of Frank's calculated plan. If he couldn't eliminate Orange and Billy, at least his demise would be documented providing incriminating evidence against them. Micro implores Dinah to intervene and help Frank. In the midst of the ordeal, Frank reluctantly uses his retinal scan to access the computers. Once done, he quickly grabs a knife hidden beneath his chair and plunges it into Agent Orange's chest. Billy reacts swiftly, knocking Frank out with the pistols, but just as Billy is about to land a lethal blow, Dinah and her team burst in, saving Frank, although Billy slips away. After attending to his injuries, Billy rushes to his office to collect money and a passport. As Homeland Security storms his office, he ambushes them, dispatching the agents and fleeing. Before leaving, he triggers a bomb that devastates his office with a massive explosion. Frank owes his survival to the expert surgical intervention of Dinah's father. In gratitude, Micro hands Frank a significant sum of money from the enemy's accounts. Both Micro and Dinah advise Frank to depart the country and pursue a serene life elsewhere, hoping he can finally escape the cycle of violence. On that same day, as Curtis sleeps, an unwelcome visitor arrives at his house, brandishing a gun. It turns out to be his best friend, Billy, seeking information on Frank's whereabouts. When Curtis admits to knowing that Frank is alive, Billy is hurt, unable to reconcile the betrayal from one friend trying to kill him and another lying to him all this time. Amidst their conversation, a bullet pierces the building, narrowly missing Billy. In retaliation for the betrayal, Billy shoots at Curtis, injuring his shoulder. As it unfolds, Frank is positioned on the adjacent building, patiently awaiting Billy to appear in the window so he can exact his revenge. Billy attempts to rise, but the moment his knife becomes visible to Frank, a shot is fired, forcing him to remain where he is. It becomes evident to Billy that escaping alive is a daunting task. Frank contacts Curtis and instructs him to put Billy on the phone. When Billy takes the phone, Frank warns him not to harm Curtis. A decision is made to meet at their usual gathering place, the park where they used to spend time together as a family. Frank decides to let Billy go, allowing him to arrive at the park, where he takes two employees hostage. As Frank approaches the location, he discovers two teenagers tied to the horses of a running carousel. Initially distracting Billy by firing in the opposite direction, Frank enters the park from another angle and launches an attack. A shootout ensues between the two adversaries. Frank silently maneuvers around the carousel to get a clear shot at Billy. He manages to hit Billy in the mouth, causing him to scream in pain as he extracts the bullet. Sensing defeat, Billy retreats toward the teenagers, demanding that Frank reveal himself, or he'll harm the kids. To protect them, Frank reluctantly tosses his knife and gun. Before Billy can carry out his threat, Dinah arrives to rescue Frank. However, in the chaos, she becomes a target and gets shot by Billy. Seizing the distraction, Frank charges at Billy, successfully disarming him. The two engage in brutal hand-to-hand combat, with Frank dominating the confrontation. He delivers multiple punches to Billy's face and then proceeds to ruthlessly rub his face on broken glass. Frank refrains from killing him, as he believes inflicting severe pain and leaving scars on his body will haunt Billy for the rest of his life. Despite Billy's pleas for death, Frank stops, believing that an easy death is not what he deserves. Billy is left critically injured at the scene. Dinah is rescued and Frank, despite his actions, is arrested. However, he is granted freedom and a new identity in exchange for not exposing the case. On the other hand, Billy has endured numerous rounds of surgery, his face now concealed by multiple layers of gauze. The doctors are unsure if he will suffer brain damage or memory loss. The looming question arises: once he recovers, will he seek revenge on Frank, determined to settle the score? That is the end of the movie. Thank you for watching.